The silence before the stormed lights inside the studio felt colder than usual that evening. Jasmine Crockett stood in front of the camera, holding a folder tightly in her hands. Her smile was soft, but behind it, there was tension she could barely hide. She had been invited to speak on a high-profile panel, show an opportunity she had worked hard for, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. The host introduced her with a strange pause. He mentioned her name, then added with a smirk, "Let's see what Miss Crockett brings to the table tonight." The audience gave a polite clap, but a few chuckles slipped through. Jasmine felt it. The atmosphere wasn't welcoming, it was waiting to pounce. She took her seat across from three men, each older, each known for dominating these panels with loud opinions and louder egos. Jasmine wasn't afraid to speak, but tonight she was surrounded. The first question came quickly, sharp and loaded. "Miss Crockett," one of the panelists began, leaning forward, "you've made bold statements about leadership, but tell us, what have you actually done that makes you an expert?" The audience went quiet. Jasmine took a slow breath. "I speak for the people who never get invited to these shows," she said calmly. "I've been on the ground. I've worked with families who are ignored every day. I've passed legislation that she didn't get to finish." Another panelist interrupted, laughing. Sure. We've all heard the campaign slogans." The third one added with a fake grin, "Don't worry, Jasmine. We'll go easy on you tonight." The audience laughed. Jasmine sat still, her hands gripping the folder tighter. The sting was real, not just in their words, but in the way the crowd responded. She had dealt with disrespect before, but tonight it was layered, rehearsed, and meant to make her small. Then it happened. The side door to the studio opened, quietly. No announcement, no camera shift. Keanu Reeves walked in. He didn't wave. He didn't say anything. He just walked to the edge of the panel stage, his black jacket soaked slightly from the rain outside. And he stood behind Jasmine, arms crossed, expression unreadable. For a second, no one noticed. Then the camera caught him. The room went still. The host stammered, "We didn't expect Keanu Reeves." The audience gasped. People whispered. Someone clapped nervously. Keanu didn't move. He just looked at Jasmine. Jasmine turned slightly. Her eyes widened. But she didn't speak. She wasn't sure why he was there. She had never met him before. But something in his eyes told her he knew. The host tried to recover. "Well, this is a surprise. Would you like to join the panel?" Keanu shook his head. "No," he said softly. The room went quiet again, and this time no one interrupted Jasmine. She looked down at her folder, then back at the men across from her. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger. "I don't need to prove myself to people who won't listen," she said. "But for those who are listening at home, this moment is for you. The people who are told to wait, to sit down, to be quiet. The ones who get laughed at for trying to speak truth." She paused. Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not here for applause," Jasmine said. "I'm here for change. And if that makes me different, I'm proud of that." There was silence then, a soft clap, then more, until the entire audience stood. The host, unsure of what to say, simply nodded. The panelists leaned back, saying nothing now, and Keanu Reeves. He finally smiled, then without a word, walked back out the same door. No speech, no explanation, just quiet support. But for Jasmine, that quiet was louder than any applause. The echo after he left the show ended with confused clapping and a silence that lingered long after the camera stopped rolling. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly in the makeup room, wiping off the studio lights from her face. The producers avoided eye contact. The panelists had already left without a word. She had expected criticism, maybe even a headline or two. But she had not expected Keanu Reeves. Her phone buzzed with messages, some from friends cheering her on, others asking what just happened. There were clips already going viral, especially the moment Keanu walked in and stood behind her like a quiet shield. But Jasmine wasn't thinking about the internet. She was thinking about why. Why would a man like him walk into that room? Would he choose that moment That show? That message? Before she could leave, a young production assistant knocked and poked his head into the room. "Miss Crockett," he said shyly, "someone left this for you." He handed her a folded piece of paper. No name, just a note. She opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat and simple. "Truth is louder when spoken with grace. Keep speaking. Some of us are always listening." She stared at the words. No one had ever told her that before. Not like that. She had been told she was too loud, too emotional, too opinionated, but never graceful, never powerful in her calm. She folded the note and tucked it into her purse. As she left the studio, the security guard at the door nodded at her and said, "Ma'am, that was ... brave." Outside, the rain had stopped. The street lights shimmered across the wet pavement. Jasmine walked to the corner where her car was parked, still wondering if it had really happened, or if it was just some strange dream. The next morning, everything changed. A major news outlet played the clip on loop. Jasmine getting interrupted, then finishing her sentence with Keanu silently behind her. People across the country started posting. Hashtags. Hashtag stand with Jasmine. Hashtag Keanu listens. Hashtag grace in silence. She tried to stay focused on work. She returned to her office, met with her team, and kept preparing for a community hearing scheduled for the weekend. But things were different now. Her inbox flooded with interview requests. Some journalists who once ignored her were now eager to hear what she had to say, but not all the attention was kind. She received angry messages to people calling her a setup, accusing her of planning the entire thing with Keanu for publicity. One message read, "No way this wasn't staged. He doesn't just show up like that." But Jasmine knew it wasn't staged. It felt like fate. That night, her assistant rushed into her office holding a phone. "You're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly. She handed Jasmine the phone. On the screen was a new post from Keanu Reeves. No video, no photo, just words. She didn't ask for backup. She didn't need it. But when a voice speaks truth in a room that tries to shut it down, standing beside it isn't a favor, a duty. Jasmine stared at it in disbelief, and suddenly she remembered something. Years ago, back when she was in law school, she had written a paper about silent strength and leadership. In that paper, she quoted a rare interview Keanu had done where he said, "Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is not speak, but just stand up." She had carried those words with her for years. Now he was carrying hers, and she had no idea just how far that moment would go or what it would cost. The quiet storm behind the camera-ass days that followed felt like a whirlwind Jasmine had no control over. Strangers were recognizing her on the street. Porters were camping outside her office. Some offered microphones in praise. Others came with hidden questions, digging for controversy. But Jasmine stayed calm. Not because she wasn't angry, but because she understood. Something now, this moment, was no longer about just her. It was about every woman who had been laughed at in meetings, every young leader who had been told to sit down, and every voice that was silenced the second it started to rise. One morning, she arrived early to her office and found a small group waiting at the door. They weren't journalists. They were teenagers. One girl stepped forward, shy but smiling. "Miss Crockett," she said softly, "we watched the video in our school.
Oh.
Our teacher said it changed how we see leadership." Jasmine knelt down and asked gently, "What did it teach you?" The girl replied that you don't need to yell to be heard. Jasmine smiled and said, "You just need to believe in what you're saying." After they left, Jasmine stood for a while in silence, feeling the weight of the moment. But behind all the support, something darker was growing. Old political rivals were suddenly appearing on talk shows, calling her an opportunist. One said she's riding the coattails of a celebrity to cover up for her weak record. Another claimed she was using Keanu to distract from real policy failures. Online, the attacks were worse. Edited clips, false stories, even threats. Her team tried to shield her, but Jasmine read everything. She had to. She wanted to understand. The fear behind the anger, and she knew the truth. What people fear most is change. Meanwhile, Keanu had gone silent again. No interviews, no appearances, no follow-ups. Just that one post. But Jasmine could still feel his presence like a steady anchor. He didn't need to be seen. He had already done what mattered then. One afternoon, as Jasmine was walking out of a youth center where she had just spoken to a room full of teenage girls, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It simply read, "Coffee." She stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Only if you tell me why you showed up that night." 5 minutes later, her phone pinged again. "Because I've seen too many people stay silent when it mattered, and too many brave voices stand alone. I didn't want you to be alone." She didn't reply right away, but her heart did. It beat louder than ever. The next morning, Jasmine quietly drove to a small cafe tucked in the back of an art gallery, exactly where the message had directed her. When she stepped inside, there were only 3 people in the room, and one of them was Keanu Reeves. He stood up as she walked in, smiled gently, and pulled out a chair for her without saying a word. She sat down for a moment. Neither of them spoke. Then Jasmine looked him in the eyes and said, "You know you didn't have to do any of this." Keanu nodded. "I know, so why me?" she asked. He took a breath and answered quietly, "Because you remind me of someone I once knew, someone who stood in front of the world, shaking but never backed down, and because kindness is rare in rooms filled with power. When I see it, I protect it." Jasmine swallowed hard. She felt her eyes burn, not with weakness, but with something deeper: recognition, respect, maybe even something that felt like healing. And in that quiet cafe, far from cameras and noise, 2 people shared a moment of truth, a moment that would shape everything that came next. The offer she never expected has passed after that quiet coffee meeting, but something inside Jasmine had shifted. It wasn't just the warmth of Keanu's words, it was the way he listened, truly listened, without needing to prove anything. She had met senators, governors, and even celebrities before. But this was different. There was no ego, it's just presence. She returned to work more focused than ever. Meetings became sharper, speeches hit deeper. The community began rallying behind her like never before. Donations rose for local causes she supported. Young people volunteered at her events. Something real was growing. It wasn't fomit, it was trust. But with the rise came pressure. Jasmine's phone rang late one evening. Her chief advisor, Tomas, sounded nervous. "You might want to sit down," said. "I'm standing in my kitchen," she replied. "Just tell me. You've been invited to speak at the World Leadership Forum in Geneva. Main stage." She froze. "What?" she whispered. "They want you to open the summit. It's their biggest session. World leaders, business icons, activists, and yes, celebrities too." Jasmine leaned against the counter. "This isn't a local panel, Jasmine," Tomas said quietly. "This is global." Jasmine's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "Why now?" He hesitated, then said, "Some say it's because of the video. Others say it's because people are tired of the same voices. Either way, they chose you." She didn't answer. Her mind was already spinning. What would she say? How would she be received? Would they laugh like the others did before? Tomas added. "Also, Keanu's name is on the guest list." Jasmine hung up and walked outside, needing air. The sky was quiet, stars overhead. For the first time in weeks, the world felt still. She thought about the little girl who had said, "You don't need to yell to be heard." She thought about her grandmother who used to tell her, "Child, speak softly, but carry the storm inside you." And then she made her decision. She would go. Geneva was colder than she expected. She wore a simple black dress and a silver bracelet passed down from her mother. No fancy makeup. No stylist, just Jasmine. As she waited backstage, the nerves returned, not fear. Just a deep, vibrating tension, the kind that comes before something big. The host of the summit walked over, smiled, and whispered, "Your story inspired the world. Now go tell it." The lights dimmed. Her name was called as Jasmine walked on stage. The crowd stood, leaders from every continent, cameras flashing, and somewhere in the middle row, she saw him, Keanu. Arms folded, head slightly tilted, just like that first night, not trying to be seen, just watching. She stood at the podium, and for a moment, she said nothing. Just silence. The crowd leaned in, and then, softly she spoke. They tried to embarrass me. A pause. They tried to make me small. They laughed. They interrupted. They expected me to break. She looked directly at the crowd now. But I didn't come here to impress. I came here to tell the truth. The audience sat frozen. The truth is, power doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's soft, and sometimes it walks in quietly and stands behind you when the world wants you to fall. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. You. See, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to speak anyway. And leadership. Leadership is standing for something, especially when it's not popular. The room was still. Not a cough, not a whisper, just eyes. All on her. I didn't rise because of fame. I rose because someone believed in me. And more importantly, I believed in myself. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, then thunder applause shook the room. She stepped away from the podium, heart pounding, eyes blurry. Backstage, people rushed to shake her hand. Journalists tried to stop her for interviews. Offers came in from organizations around the world. But Jasmine didn't stop. She walked straight outside, into the night, and there he was. Waiting by the steps, Keanu. He looked at her with a proud smile and said, "You didn't just speak, you shook the world." Jasmine laughed quietly, almost in disbelief. "I didn't expect any of this." Keanu replied, "That's because you weren't chasing it, and that's why it came to you." Then he handed her a folded paper, read. "It later," he said. She looked down at it, then back at him. "What is it?" she asked. He smiled again, something that might change everything. The paper that opened doors. Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her hotel room, the folded paper still untouched in her lap. The applause from the summit still echoed in her mind. Her speech had gone viral within hours. Her inbox was overflowing. Invitations. From universities, nonprofits, global leaders endeared. It was this small, simple note from Keanu that felt heavier than all of it. She finally unfolded the paper. It wasn't long, just a handwritten message. The world needs more than leaders. It needs builders. If you're ready, meet me in Los Angeles next week. No cameras, just vision. Below that was an address. Jasmine stared at it for a long time. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but deep down, she felt that this wasn't about fame. It wasn't about another interview or speech. It was something else, something bigger. A week later, Jasmine arrived at the address in Los Angeles. It wasn't a mansion or a studio. It was a quiet, almost hidden building near a children's hospital. Plain brick. No signs. Just a rusted gate and a keypad. She pressed the buzzer. A moment passed. Then a soft voice came through. "Come in." The gate clicked. She walked inside, and what she saw made her stop in place. It was a large open space filled with blueprints, whiteboards, laptops, and people young, old, of all colors and backgrounds. Some were coding, some sketching architecture, others planning logistics on tablets. In the center of it all, standing at a large table with rolled maps and coffee cups, was Keanu. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Glad you came." Jasmine walked toward him slowly. "What is this place?" He gestured around. "This is the future we're trying to build, and I want you to be part of it." She looked confused. "You mean like a charity?" He shook his head. "Not charity. It's not politics. Something different. Something honest. We're building learning hubs across underserved communities. Places where kids can learn for free technology, leadership, self-worth. No gatekeeping, no big donors. It's just people helping people." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Why didn't anyone know about this?" "Because it's not for attention," Keanu said softly. "It's for impact. The world is full of talkers. We're doing the work quietly. but it's growing. And we need someone like you to help lead the next phase." She didn't answer right away. She was overwhelmed, but not scared. She walked over to a board filled with sticky notes, each one a dream written by a child. Some said, "I want to help my mom." Others said, "I want to become a scientist," or "I want to stop kids from being bullied." She turned to Keanu. "You've been doing this all along?" she asked. He nodded. "I don't need headlines. I need results." She smiled softly. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." He smiled back. "Neither are you. That's why I'm asking, will you join us?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, "but not just to help. To build. To fight for the kids no one fights for." Keanu nodded. "That's what I hoped you'd say." From that moment on, they worked side by side. Not as celebrity and politician, but as two people who believed in kindness, honesty, and action. Within months, Jasmine was leading the expansion of learning hubs in 3 cities. She used her voice to gather educators, artists, engineers, and everyday people who just wanted to help. The media caught on again. They tried to spin it as another feel-good story, but Jasmine refused interviews. She told her team, "We don't need headlines. We need hope." People listened. Because Jasmine didn't talk at them, she talked with them one night. After working late at the hub, she stepped outside and found Keanu leaning against the wall, sipping coffee. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded, "but a good one. A kid told me he wants to start his own hub one day." Keanu smiled. "That's how it begins." Jasmine looked at him seriously. "Why me, though?" Could have asked anyone. He looked into her eyes and said, "Because the night they tried to silence you, you didn't break. You spoke. And you spoke for people who never get a mic. That's rare. And rare is what changes the world." Her eyes filled again, but this time, not with pain, with purpose. When the world finally listened months passed, then a year. The learning hubs expanded from 3 cities to 12. Each one became a place of peace in neighborhoods filled with noise. Students arrived after school, some still carrying the weight of their homes, others just looking for one quiet moment where someone would see them. They found Jasmine Crockett waiting. She wasn't just running a program, she was changing how people saw leadership. She sat on the floors with kids, listened to single mothers, partnered with former inmates who wanted to teach real-life skills to the next generation. And every time a politician or sponsor offered to rebrand the project, she said the same thing: "This is not a product, it's a promise." Keanu never took the spotlight. He came and went quietly. He cleaned whiteboards, fixed loose wires, refilled bookshelves. The students knew him, but not as a movie star. They called him Mr. Keanu. To them, he wasn't famous. He was dependable. One day, Jasmine stood in front of the largest crowd of her life, not at a summit, not on television, but at the opening of their newest hub, this time in her old neighborhood. She looked out and saw hundreds of faces, kids she once babysat, teachers who once doubted her, neighbors who once laughed at her dreams. She took the microphone, but didn't speak right away. She looked toward the edge of the stage. Keanu stood there, not in a suit, not with cameras, just arms folded, quiet, proud. She turned back to the crowd and said softly, "Do you remember when they tried to embarrass me?" Some nodded. "Do you remember how it felt watching someone be made small, just for being honest?" More nods. "That night changed my life. Not because someone stood up for me, but because someone stood with me." She pointed to the back of the room, where the students stood in matching shirts that read, "We are the voice now." The crowd erupted in applause. "This hub," Jasmine said, "is not mine. It's yours. And every kid who walks through that door will know they are seen, they are needed, and they are powerful." As the ribbon was cut, balloons flew into the sky. People laughed, cried, hugged strangers. But Jasmine stepped away from the crowd and found Keanu watching from a distance. She walked over, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "For you," she said. He took it with a smile. "I didn't do much." She looked at him and whispered, "You showed me how to build something without needing the world to notice." He nodded slowly. "You showed me what happens when the world finally does notice the right people." He stood there in silence, Two people who had never planned to become symbols, too. People who never wanted to be heroes, just humans, trying to make a little more room for hope. Years later, a book would be written about the movement. Schools across the country would include Jasmine's story in their curriculum, and in the hallways of every learning hub, a small frame would hang. Inside it, one note, in simple handwriting: "Truth is louder when spoken with grace. Keep speaking. Some of us are always listening."